Welcome, treasures of DUP, to this online virtual training. I hope that whether you are a brand new treasurer or one who has served for many years, you will be able to glean something from this training that is going to take place today. I would like to first familiarize you with what the website looks like and where the training is available. You'll notice this is on ISDUP.org is the name of our website. This is what the homepage looks like. And you're going to be particularly interested in this leadership tab and this forms tab. We're going to start with the leadership tab. And today we're going to spend most of the time talking to our company treasurers, whose information is in this section. But this will also apply to camp treasurers and to those who serve on a museum board as a treasurer. I want to show you, before we begin with the company officer training, let me show you where your more specific training will take place. You're going to go into this camp officer information, and if you are a camp treasurer, this is where you will click to bring up the information about your camp treasurer responsibilities, the reports you're responsible for, the budget, different deadlines, things like that. So I might ask you to please read through this very carefully, and this will give you a lot of information that will be very helpful to you in your position. Also here, there is a document called IRS Information for DUP Company and Camps. This is identical whether you're under the camp or the company officer information. This is critical information for those who have a museum, a cabin, a historic site they're over, who solicit donations other than member dues, who apply for grants. This is very critical information that you are well acquainted with and that you have read through. So familiarize yourself with this, no matter whether or not you think you need to, and then you can decide how much of this you need to be concerned about. But this is a very important document. You'll also notice here at the bottom, there are two documents here for museums. This museum director and board document does have a section in here that has to do with the museum treasurer right here, number 3. And that is very important for you to read and be familiar with if you're a museum treasurer. As well, this satellite museum policies and guidelines has a section in it for museum finances, and then a little bit section on grants. And the treasurer is usually directly responsible for those two sections. So we recommend that you read that and become familiar with it. This same document can also be found under this museum subtab, satellite museums, and the exact same document is right there for you to access. Let's go back now to our leadership tab, go into our company officer information, and today we're going to spend a little bit more time in this treasurer document for company treasurers. All of our training documents are set up under the same basic format. The name of the document will always be over here. There's an introduction that kind of gives you a general definition of what your responsibilities are. There's a summary of the ISDUP Constitution and bylaws. And I do need to mention that in our current bylaws, some of the titles of our documents are a little confusing in there. Almost all of those have been changed as far as titles go. And so even though the basic information is correct in there, don't be too concerned about the names of the documents. You're going to want to go by what is in this most current training as far as the names of the reports and things like that. If you look at your responsibilities as a company treasurer, it's going to first of all list the deadlines that you've got. These will be slightly different deadlines if you're a camp treasurer, and those are listed in your own document. But these give you the basic dates of things that you need to submit and the dates they need to be submitted by. And then if you go to the end of the document, it has this form you can print, this little table that tells you the dates things are due, who prepares them, what they are, and who you send them to. And so this is really helpful to have posted someplace or kept where you can easily access it. If you go to the next page, there is a very detailed flow chart as to how to handle the dues that come in when our camp meetings start in September. And those are due by the end of October. For on the camp level, they're due by the 15th, but this flow chart is also available at the end of the camp documents. And so this is a great resource that will help you through that process. This is also covered extensively in the secretarial and membership dues training. And so if you want to have more extensive training on this, please listen to that little video as well that has been prepared. Let's go back now to this section on company budgets. And there's just a couple of things I want to notate about this. The first one is we now ask that associates pay fees in the same amount as the members pay dues, and this is to the camp and the company as well as to ISDUP. We know it does not say this in the current bylaws, but this has been voted on and is a new policy that we now have in place that has been in place for a few years now. And so we do ask that associates pay the same amount since they are still listening to the same lessons, they're going to the same meetings, eating the same refreshments, attending the same convention. And so we ask that they help with those expenses as well. The second one I want to really have you note is this E, company funds are to be used for DUP purposes. And for this, I mean that those fees that you're bringing in from the camps that you're assessing, they need to be used for things that have to do specifically with DUP, your meetings, your jubilee, your district conventions, which benefit the entire company. They should not be used for things like giving flowers to someone who's lost a husband. Those come from individuals. That is, even though that woman is a DUP person, that funeral and that thing is not a DUP event. And so we don't use those funds that we have asked ladies to donate for DUP for things like that. They would do that individually. It is appropriate, however, to take those funds in an appropriate amount and perhaps buy a DUP pin for a president who is retiring, or maybe a 5 or 10 or 15 or 20-year pin for a lady that you are honoring for her years in DUP, because those are DUP pins. And again, you're honoring them for a DUP purpose. We also have some other award pins here at DUP, and that is totally appropriate to use your company and camp funds for. Let's talk a little bit about bank accounts. Please read this section very carefully. There's a lot of information in here. Specifically, read the section about EIN numbers. You should all have an EIN number. Otherwise, if you do not, that means your bank account is tied to a person, to their social security number, and that means that that person then becomes responsible for that account. If something were to happen to her, there may be a problem closing that account, getting the money out of that account. It's just not a good idea. Plus, it gives her all the liability with the money in that account. And so it's just not a good idea to do that. If it has an EIN number, which stands for Employer Identification Number, and this is issued by the IRS, that number is attached to your camp or your company, and it remains the same. So even if you have a new treasurer or a new company president or a new camp captain, you have to change the signatories on your account. The account itself stays the same. The account number stays the same. If it's attached to a person and that person no longer is going to be the treasurer and is no longer be a signer on that account, you would have to then close out the account every 2 years when that happens and open up a brand new account. And so just for liability purposes, we ask that you please attach your accounts to an EIN number. Now, when you apply for an EIN number, there are two different kinds. For one of those that most of you would have to apply for, you need that number strictly because you have a bank account, and so it's for banking purposes only. For those of you who do have a building or artifacts in a building, or you need that tax exempt status because you have a museum or a cabin or something like that, you have to have an EIN number that is designated for a tax exempt organization. And in that case, there is some paperwork that has to be filled out, sent into me, that then has to be sent into the IRS to register you as a tax exempt organization under that EIN number. Most of you have already done this that need to. I think I have a handful of maybe 5 or 6 camps and companies combined that I still need to have that paperwork from. And there is, in one case, a group who's turned in their paperwork but doesn't have the right kind of EIN number and needs to get a different kind of EIN number, the one that specifies them as a nonprofit. Most of you have taken care of this, but read through this carefully so that you understand what I'm talking about here. One thing that I really want to emphasize is it does not matter what kind of EIN number you have, that as far as the bank is concerned, the only reason you have that EIN number is for banking purposes only. Do not go in and tell them that you are a tax exempt organization, or they will try to set you up with an account that is going to be way more than you want to handle and is most likely going to have fees attached. So again, no matter if you are tax exempt according to the IRS, or you just have a banking only number, as far as your bank, tell them you only need that number for banking purposes only. If you are having trouble setting up an account at the bank that does not assess fees, there are some suggestions I can give you to try. One of them is that sometimes a credit union is easier to work with. They usually require that somebody who is going to be signing on the account has an account at the credit union. Also, some credit unions require that you have a savings account in order to not have a fee assessed. If that is the case, you can open up a very small savings account for the most minimum amount. In the case of my own camp, they require a $5 amount in a savings account. So we keep that amount in there. We don't draw from it. We don't add to it. And every year when we do our financial report at the end of the year, we just have to remember to add that $5 into our total so that our totals match what we have in our bank statement. But that's a possibility as well. Sometimes regional banks are a little easier to work with than national banks. We don't really recommend that you have a savings account only, but if you only write a couple of checks a year and only make maybe 1 or 2 deposits a year, that might be something you would look into if you cannot get a regular checking account to work without a fee. One other possibility is setting up a money market account. On these accounts, they often require that you have a debit card. You could get that and just never use it. They usually give you the debit card because on a money market, there usually is a limit as to how many checks you can write a month. Often it is 3, but in most cases, that would be very doable for most companies and for almost all camps, because there would never be more than that amount of checks that would be written in any given month. You can certainly read through the rest of these guidelines in the rest of this section. I do want to mention this: company money should never be used for personal use, even temporarily. And again, that's why everything should go through your company account, never through a personal account, and then put into your company account. You do not want that liability, and you need to have a clear record of where your money travels so that it all looks very much on the up and up and is on the up and up. We do have some women asking us about Venmo. If you have Venmo set up personally, it will allow you to add more than one account to that Venmo. So you could add your company bank account or your camp bank account to that. Just recognize that whatever name you use for your Venmo account, and if it's set up for you personally, it's probably is your name, that it's going to look like when you send money to a person from your company or camp, it's going to come out from your name. And also when they pay money, it's going to look like it's coming into you personally. I mean, you can let them know, I have this set up. I'm making sure that I'm selecting, if you have more than one account on your Venmo, there's a little drop down menu that you can click on, and anytime you pay money or receive money, you choose which bank account that's going to come from or go into, but you would just have to assure that person that you are putting the money or taking the money from your camp or company account and not your personal account. For that reason, if you want to use Venmo, I would highly suggest you have someone set up that Venmo app that does not personally use it and sets it up on their phone or their computer so that it is just under your company or camp name. And that kind of takes away that gray area where people are kind of wondering, well, they said I was getting this payment from the company, but it looks like it's coming from this person, because they can't see that account number when that transfer is made. If you have any further questions about that, you can contact me. A note about archiving: all your actual reports should be archived. That would be your financial report at the end of the year. That would be your membership dues summary that comes in with your dues in the fall. Those should be kept permanently. You should keep your bank records, meaning your checkbook records. They should be kept back 7 years, but your bank statements only need to be kept 2 years, and they do not need to be in written form as long as you can access them online. We are still hearing about groups that have a little kitty or a box and collect cans of food or money to give to charities outside of DUP. This is absolutely against DUP policy. And we talk again about donating to groups outside of DUP. This is a very important section. Please read through it so that you understand what DUP policies are and you are in compliance with them. This is a more detailed section on the different reports that you will be responsible for. Whether you are on the camp or the company level, you are responsible for collecting dues and dispersing the parts of the dues that go to wherever they're supposed to go to. So if you're a camp treasurer, you're going to collect the dues for the camp and the company and ISDUP. You're going to keep your camp dues, deposit all those, keep your camp dues, and then write a check to your company treasurer for the company dues, however much they're assessing, and all the ISDUP dues. And then the company treasurer is going to deposit all of those from all the camps, and she's going to write one check to ISDUP for the ISDUP portion of that money, both the dues and the fees from the associates. And this is very clearly outlined here. And also, again, if you go to this flow chart at the back, and if you still need additional information on that, there is, if you go back to our leadership, there is a whole section in the forms here under membership dues that gives you instructions as well as the summary sheets. And so this is what you will need to copy to pay the dues and send them in, or to collect the dues and send them in. And then there's instructions there, but it's all very clearly outlined right there. Let's go back to our company officer information. Again, here is a section on the IRS guidelines. Maybe quickly before I go to that, if you look up here on the reports, it does talk about the camp annual financial, oh, excuse me, I'm in the camp. Let me go back to the company. I apologize. Let's go back to here. All right. Here in the company reports, it talks about the company annual financial review. And one thing I need to make note of here, this is due to me on June 30th. And generally, you will have by June 15th collected all of your camp annual financial reviews. And for the most part, those are kept at the camp level. But if you have camps who are responsible for those buildings, they have a little cabin, they have a little camp museum, they're over, and they're responsible for filing that 990 NE postcard that we're going to talk about in just a minute. I need a copy of that camp review for just those camps when you send in your company review. And this is very clearly outlined here. And then there's a little section about who needs to do a satellite museum annual financial review. Sometimes you won't need to send that in if you don't keep your funds separately, but if you do, you'll need to send that in separately with those funds accounted for, and then a separate company or camp annual financial review. In the past, we have required this when you've had a district convention. We no longer need this document either for the company treasurer or for the satellite museum update to their members. And that is because now we are using the reports from the last completed fiscal year, which will be taken directly from the numbers that are reported on this form here and on this form here. This is from the whole year, not from the middle of the year. And so if you hold, for example, your convention in March, you're not reporting from just June 1 to March, you're going to report from the entire last year, which would be the last fiscal year, which would go from June 1 to May 31st, that's already in the past. And that's what's contained on this report that comes into me. And that's what is reported on this report as well. And because they're the exact same figures, we no longer need this sent in to us. I briefly want to talk about the 990N. There's a lot of confusion about this, so please read through this section and read through the IRS section. There is a link contained in here that isn't showing right now, but as this airs, there will be a link in here where you can actually click to file that e-postcard, and there will be another link that will refer you to a nice little publication you can print that takes you on a step-by-step, gives you step-by-step directions and instructions as to how to file that. All the filing really is letting the IRS know that you still are open, you still have that building, you still have jurisdiction over that, you still are a working DUP company or camp, and they want to know who the contact person is. The hardest part of this whole process is setting up the account, and that little instructional booklet will take you through that again, step by step. And then following that, each year you just put in your password that you've set up, and you go to the filing option, and you just check your information and make sure that the person who's listed is the person that you want to receive any information if the IRS needs to contact them, and you submit it. It can be done anytime after the fiscal year ends on May 31st, but I highly suggest you do it in the month of June. If you are a camp and you're going to be turning in your annual financial review by June 15th, there's a place on there that you have to notate whether or not you have to submit that 990N e-postcard, and I'll show you that in just a minute. And if you have done that between June 1 and June 15th, you can notate that yes, you need to do it, and yes, you have turned that in to us. It's the same with the company. That report is due June 30th. If you can file that 990N e-postcard prior to June 30th, then you can notate it on that report. The same as the satellite annual financial review. That really helps me so that I do not have to do a lot of checking back. Once I've received the form and I see that they haven't done it, I have to make sure that's done by October 15th with the IRS, and you're going to get a lot of emails and things from me back and forth, hoping that you can take care of that. If you do not file that e-postcard for 3 years in a row, they will revoke your status. And at that point, the only way you can use that same EIN number is to pay, which is now over a $500 fee. There are some ways to get around that, but it requires getting a whole new EIN number. You have to do it under a different entity. It's kind of a hassle. And so it's just better to keep up with that filing. I'm happy to help you with that, go over it with you over the phone if you have questions, but that guide that you can print out will help you a great deal with that. Lastly, I get lots of phone calls about what's appropriate for fundraisers and raffles. If you will read this through, I think this is pretty clear. You need to kind of come up with a reasoning of why you're holding a fundraiser. If you're doing it to repair a cabin's roof that you're responsible for, or you're raising donations because you're putting an addition or fixing some things in your museum, those are great reasons. If you're just having fundraisers so that you can have better, more expensive meetings, you want to have big dinners every month and you don't want to charge the ladies that much money, that's really not a very good reason to have a fundraiser and expect the community to fund your monthly meetings. So you need to reassess kind of what you're assessing for your monthly meetings and make sure you're doing that within your budget. And then these would be for extra things. If you have accumulated a lot of extra money, there are always projects at ISDUP we can take contributions for, donations. And there are also other camps and companies who may need help trying to renovate a cabin, or maybe they're trying to raise money for a marker, which is not cheap, and they could use some help with that. And so if you have lots of extra funds and you really don't need that much in your checking account, you can always contact us and we can put you in the direction of a DUP need where you can donate that money. A reminder that raffles are not legal in the state of Utah and in many other states. A raffle is the definition of it is basically the same as gambling, and it's buying a chance at something. So if you are selling a ticket, whether it's at $1 or $5 or whatever it is, and only one person wins that prize, that is a raffle, and it is illegal according to Utah law. The only way you can get around that, if you are selling tickets to give a prize away, is that every single person who buys a ticket has to get something for that ticket. So it can be a lesser prize, it can be a candy bar, it could be whatever you decide, but every single person who buys a ticket has to receive something for that purchase. And then you could give that large prize to someone else. Another way you can do that if you want to just give away a quilt or something is you can just do it as a door prize or something, but you wouldn't receive any money for that. But please be aware of what the raffles law is in your state. And again, in the state of Utah, it is illegal. So if you're going to do that and sell tickets, you need to make sure every single person who buys a ticket receives something for that. The last thing I want to talk about are the forms. If you go into the form section under treasurer, here are where the treasurer forms are for the financial reviews. If you want to do the membership forms, they are under these membership dues again. And that's where you're going to access those that have to do with the membership dues you're collecting. The treasurer forms right here will give you your camp annual financial review, your company, your satellite museum annual financial review. This is just an enlarged check register, basically. So there it comes up. You can use this if you would like. It is not mandatory. Some ladies like to show a running record of their expenses. It's a little easier to maybe look at when you're trying to, you know, show your balances and things to other people who are reviewing your account, but it's up to you. Your checkbook is totally adequate if you want to keep that as your record. Going back to these reports, let's go first to the camp annual financial review. You'll notice this beginning balance here needs to be exactly the same as what your ending balance was in your last year's review. The last year would have ended on May 31, and then the very next day is the beginning balance, June 1 of the new year. And so those figures need to balance. If they do not balance, I will let you know when I won't let you know, your company treasurer will let you know on the camp level, but you need to check this. So company treasurers, when you get these camp reviews, you need to look at your last year's review that you have received and make sure that those two figures match. And if they don't, then you need to go back to that camp treasurer and say, you need to find this discrepancy and correct it because something's wrong. It also gives that section here that I was telling you about the 990N e-postcard. Is your camp required to file, yes or no? And if yes, have you filed? You will get reports that say, yes, I'm supposed to file. No, I have not. You need to keep on those people. They need to file that, and it needs to be done before October 15th or they're going to get a late notice. Here's where the signatures take place. If you're one of the people asked to sign, this is where the treasurer puts her information. The same person cannot prepare and review the report. So the treasurer prepares it, 3 other people review it. This is more than just glancing at this paper and signing it. She should be bringing you the checkbook and hopefully at least your final bank statement to make sure that they agree, because you are signing that all these questions, you agree with them. Is the receipt balance accurate? Are the disbursements accurate? Does the checkbook balance with the bank statement? If not, why not? It probably is because there's an outstanding check or deposit or something like that. But you need to make sure when you sign your name here that you have looked over those records and that you stand behind them. When I get a review on the company level that has mistakes in, and there are 4 signatures saying they have looked at that, I have to question that because something is not right there. Let's go back and look at the form for the company. And it's basically the same type of information. Here's the 990 NE postcard information. I do want to make note of this. Normally you are going to retain the camp financial reviews at the company level. I don't need them. But if a camp is required to fill out that 990 or to submit that 990 NE postcard, I also need a copy of that review sent in with this company annual financial review. And that talks about it right there. I don't need all of them, just any of those camps, whether or not they filed or not. If they're supposed to file, I need a copy of that review sent in. And again, please make sure if you're one of these people signing that you have looked over those records and you stand behind them. It's a little different with the Satellite Museum review. It's a 2-page document. We ask you to break this out a little bit more. And then you go to the second page, and here's where it talks about the 990 NE postcard, because sometimes the camps or companies file them under their number. Sometimes the museum has gotten their own Satellite Museum EIN number and they file. So the questions are a little different, but please read through this carefully. And again, this is more explained in more detail in those other documents we talked about earlier from about the IRS and also the reports. I hope this has been informative to you. If you have any other questions, I hope that you will feel free to call me or to email me. I'm usually here at the museum at my office on Mondays and Tuesdays. You can email me at treasurer@isdup.org. My contact information is listed at the bottom of all of the forms that we have looked at. I do get my email at home as well, and so I can look at those even if I am not in the office. If you have a question, I invite you to first look through these documents so that you can see if it is answered in there. And if you still have a question, I am very happy to help you. Good luck, daughters, going forward with this new DUP year, and hope that you enjoy your responsibilities as a treasurer. Thanks so much.